Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and once again, it's time for the Q&A, so let's go ahead and get this started. All right, first question. If someone has had a layoff from training, would it be worth them restarting a linear progression program just to return to the numbers they were lifting before the layoff, assuming their strength has gone down? I covered this a lot during some of the lockdown videos, and I made a very, very, very good case for people being able to go to conjugate immediately if they did home workouts. That's one example I can give you. And I definitely had a lifter. I had a lifter who did not have access to a rack, any sort of significant weight. I mean, I want to say I think he has something like 150 pounds total at home without a rack. And so we did mostly conditioning work, and I put him on conjugate. And I want to say he benched like 285 and had something like a 405 or 410 box squat and around a 500 deadlift his first week back in the gym. Okay, now this was like 3 months without access to any real, like we would think of as serious training, but we got him in shape. That's one example. Another thing, I've had people who completely detrained and have lost several months of training, who've come over to me who had some experience with conjugate type training, and you do 2 to 3 weeks of linear programming and then you throw them back into conjugate, right? It's all you need. So when we say a linear progression program, I hope you don't mean like starting strength or something. If you're talking about running one of those novice linear progression programs, I am going to say absolutely not. Absolutely not. Are you talking about doing a higher volume, upper, lower, like 4-day-a-week program to get back into the swing of things to re-kick in your muscle memory? Yeah, potentially. For like 3, 4, 5 weeks. Okay? That's all you're going to need. And I wouldn't even worry about your strength. You need to just get in and do some rep. I'm assuming you've done no real training. Like you haven't touched any free weights for several months, and you had already built somewhat of a base, a reasonable base. We're no longer a true novice. A few weeks of training on a good upper lower with some barbell movements. Something in the range of about 10 to 15 total working sets per week per muscle group, using the different ways that we measure those. You guys know certain movements are like half sets. Would be perfectly reasonable on a quick linear progression program taking sets pretty close to failure. And I'd keep the reps a little higher, like 6 to 10 probably. Maybe some 15s for a few lighter movements. But not to run something like starting strength, not running like a novice LP. No, absolutely not. You don't ever need to run one of those more than once. Don't run one of those more than once ever in your life. There's no need. Then you go over to the level of programming that's necessary, and I'd recommend some conjugate. And if you can't stand conjugate, which I don't know why, then something like 5-3-1 or whatever would be appropriate after that. Okay, that's what I would recommend. But as far as a linear progression, yeah, just a few weeks worth. You're not going to need to do it for like 3 months or anything. Not necessary. All right, next question. Hi, Jason. What do you think of doing push press variations on upper speed day? I like both overhead pressing and bench pressing, but I'm not competing at any sport. Push presses for RE work? Yeah, if you enjoy push presses, you're proficient at it and you can do it without hurting yourself, and you want to do some push presses for some of your volume, for like an overhead or shoulder slot, I think it's perfectly fine on dynamic effort day, especially because, again, it's kind of an explosive movement. I hope you don't mean as actual speed work, because no, it's not going to be true speed work. It's not the same thing. I would only recommend to certain people they even do overhead pressing for speed work. And let me make that clear. If you don't compete in a sport where you overhead press, I wouldn't recommend it. Okay, and that's doing it with a strict press. And if you do, that's a whole different topic. It doesn't mean that all of your overhead work, speed work, needs to be done. You still need to be doing benching for a lot of your speed days. So over to your question. Yeah, I think it's fine. It's perfectly reasonable. if you like the push press and you want to do the push press and you get a lot out of it. Now, keep in mind, you're also doing that for developing explosiveness to go with your shoulders. It's not going to build the same strength potential that a strict press does. Okay, in other words, if you're doing it for carryover to your bench press, for example, strict pressing carries over to benching better. And that's not my opinion. That's the opinion of a lot of coaches. Okay, that's the opinion of a lot of coaches who bench more than me. Okay, so let's make that very, very clear. Let's set that aside. I'm not the most amazing bench specialist. I have to fight for every single pound of my bench. I'm not genetically gifted at the movement. As far as carryover goes, we see a pretty good consensus among strength coaches that a lot of times if you have an athlete who responds well to overhead pressing to it improving their bench, the strict press does seem to carry over better than the push press does. Okay, it's just facts. Push press has certain benefits for athleticism though. Okay, it's a more athletic movement. So it really comes down to what it is you're trying to do with this exercise. Like with anything else, I could look at that and say, yeah, that sounds perfectly reasonable. But the caveat being, what specifically are you using the tool for? What are you using the tool for? What are you trying to get out of it? You're just trying to get some extra pressing strength and power in your upper body. Non-specific, because let's say you're not trying to increase your bench, for example, with it. And you're just trying to be a little more athletic and explosive, and you want to work that in, by all means, do so. Might I suggest, though, that you work with stuff like maybe some hang cleans, or not even hang cleans, perhaps high pulls, right? They're going to do a lot of the same thing you're trying to do there. Just throwing that out there. You could maybe do both. I personally prefer the high pulls. But, push presses have their place, and I've certainly done some. I've done them on camera in the past. Right? Exactly in those sort of slots. So again, it's a question of what are you trying to do with it. All right, next question. Do you time your rest between sets, or are you simply going when you feel ready? Ooh, now that's a good question. People ask me that a lot. Most of my lifting, I don't know, I don't care, I don't time it. Now, some of my clients get upset because I assign them rest times. I assign you guys rest times because you don't have 5 hours to spend at the gym. We want a certain amount of work density. Now, when I say that, I don't mean all lifts. When I say I don't time anything, I mean maxes. You know what? Some of those max effort lifts could be 3 minutes apart, those attempts. Some of them might be 15 minutes apart. And you know what? I don't plan it. I just go when I feel ready. That's it. Whenever I feel ready. With all the work sets for the supplemental lift, the big multi-joint movements, they're pretty long breaks. Like, I'm not going to lie. Do I time them? No. And when I say long breaks, I mean 3 minutes or longer. I don't time them, so I can't tell you, oh, it's exactly that. And I'll get over in a minute to what I do time. A lot of explosive lifts, I'd actually take really short breaks. Let's say high pulls, pen leg rows, things like that. You know what? There are times when I'll do those a minute apart. I don't care. They're explosive lifts, even though they might be a percentage of my max, and I might be working with a fairly heavy weight. I feel like I bounce back pretty quick on lifts like that. In other words, I can do some really heavy pen leg rows, like 4 or 5 sets in a row with 60 seconds or so. 90 seconds. Do I time it? No, not really. I'll walk around, catch a breather, and then go hit them. Speed work. Very, 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 very short. I don't run an exact timer, but I have a real good estimate. I don't even turn the camera off. I just hit the start and stop on the record. I leave the camera on, pointed at it. If I'm wearing a belt or whatever, I usually put the belt on, and I don't even take the belt off. That belt stays on, stays latched up for all the sets. On average, the benching and the squats, maybe 60 seconds, maybe a minute. In some cases, a minute and a half, but I generally shoot for approximately a minute. The speed pulls around 30 to 45 seconds. In other words, a lot of times on a speed pull, I walk over back to the camera, turn the record off so that I have separate files to make my life easier, less editing. I prefer to minimize my editing on this stuff if I can. So I usually walk over, turn the camera back off, maybe count about 10 seconds or so, just ballpark, re-hit the start button and go back over. The only time I stop is if I feel like I need to throw some more chalk on my hands or something and I need the liquid grip to dry for a minute or two. Then it might be a little longer, but otherwise it's like I turn the camera off, chill about 10 seconds, maybe 15, whatever, re-hit the button again and go back and pull again. So speed work is pretty well timed. A lot of the explosive lists are just shorter breaks in general. Everything else, I don't time it. I don't care. It's not necessary for me to time it. Okay, I don't schedule other work to do of any type in my training window. Right? And if I do, I kind of prepare around that a little bit, and I'll rush through certain parts of the workout so that I can be between certain exercises. I don't want to interrupt close grip benching multiple sets or something to go deal with a client in Skype and then, get cold. If I'm going to do it, I make sure that I have it set up to where I'm going to be between exercises or even muscles. So it's like if I'm going to do that, I might do all of my pressing first, go deal with a client Skype that I've scheduled and kind of time my training around that, and then maybe all the pulling type work afterwards, for example. So hopefully that explains it a little bit better. All right, guys, well, that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time in part 2.